Good evening, councillors, members of the public. Before we start the meeting, can I remind you of the fire drill, which is on the screen behind me and over there. Please make sure you know where your nearest exit is, and we meet under the canopy at Waitrose. If you hear the fire alarm, please follow us. Can you also make sure that your phones are off, please, or switched to silent? And make sure that you have put your cards in, members, and that you do speak directly into the microphone so that everybody can hear you. Can I just remind the members of the public that this is not a public meeting, it's a meeting in public. And so please speak, obviously, if you have a slot for public speaking, but apart from that, we would ask you not to join in the debate, please. Before we start, could I just introduce the officers? We have Lewis Jones from the Legal Department, Peter Cleveland, the Head of Development Control, and Louise Yandel, the Area Team Leader for Southern and Western. Very small team tonight, but we've obviously got quality, not quantity this evening, so we hope. Just, if I could just briefly mention a couple of things before we go into the planning applications. One of these applications, both of them were called in by members. One was called in late. And we as members are often criticising the officers, I should say, for their part that they play in the planning process. But we as members must take some responsibility now for improving the service. We're here to serve the public, and by doing what we have to do, we can together produce a much more efficient service. So basically, members, when you receive your list, you should immediately go down that list and inform an officer if you feel there might be a reason why this application should be called into committee. You can always change your mind later, but we have far too many people calling in far too late now. You've got a 3-week slot, and that is more than enough to go into your applications for your ward and have a look and see if there's anything that you think might be contentious or should be aired in public. I think it's the least we can do to support our officers is for us to put a bit more effort in so that together we're producing an efficient and effective system. And while I'm just sort of going, can I just remind you as well that you should have no prejudices as you're sitting around tonight. And if any of you are sitting there with a prejudice that is so strong that it will colour any of your decision making, then you should query whether or not you should be sitting on this particular committee. You have to be able to have your mind changed by the debate. And if that is not possible for whatever reason, then I ask that you consider really seriously whether the planning application is for your planning committee is for you. Oh, and just one last thing that one of the officers raised. During that 3-week window, and at any point, in fact, officers are always willing to show individual ward members, or anybody else for that matter, the full plans. So if you're having difficulty accessing the plans online, you have the option of getting in touch with the officers, coming in and looking at the plans in larger scale. So I do really think we have got to start being much more active in this. Sorry for the lecture, but I think, we have to work together to get this correct for the public. So, moving on swiftly to the agenda, the minutes have been available. Are you content that I sign them? Apologies for absence, Emma?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillors Gillian Hargreaves and Namil Desir.
Thank you very much. And are there any disclosures of interest before the meeting?
I believe Farnham Town Councillors declare a non-pecuniary interest.
Does anybody else have an interest? In which case, are there any questions from the members of the public, Emma?
None received, Chairman.
Peter, do we have any relevant updates to government guidance or legislation?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, hopefully this evening for you all a good update. My update's a general update as well as a verbal update to both agenda items A1 and A2. It's to confirm that the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan was made on Friday, which members will hopefully be aware of, following the successful referendum and the failure of the JR that was brought against it. So that's really positive news, and it's the first neighbourhood plan for the borough, so that's really positive going forward. But as such, full weight can be given to the neighbourhood plan now. It now forms part of the development plan for the neighbourhood plan of that area, and the policies contained in it are fully up to date and consistent with the NPPF, so that allows it to become part of the development plan. So I suppose well done to the efforts of the neighbourhood plan group, and it's we'll put it into practice as it goes forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Peter. Should any site inspections be necessary as a result of this meeting, they'll be held on the 29th of August at a time to be agreed. So can we move straight on, please, to the applications? There's 2 applications tonight, both of which are subject to public speaking. And Louise, as you're the only officer here, I take it you're going to introduce both.
Thank you, Chairman. The first application is at 2 Kiln Lane in Lower Bourne, and it's for the erection of 2 dwellings following the demolition of the existing dwelling. The site is located on the western side of Kiln Lane and is currently occupied by a bungalow. This shows an aerial photograph of the site and the surrounding residential properties. There are a mixture of properties in the surrounding area, including both detached and semi-detached dwellings. This first photograph shows the front of the property, taken from Kiln Lane. The tree to the right of the photograph, which is just here, is subject to a tree protection order. This second photograph is also taken from the front, and you can see the adjoining property at 4 Kiln Lane in the rear of the photo. This third photograph is also taken from the front, looking towards number 2A Kiln Lane. And this final photograph is taken from the rear of the property with 4 Kiln Lane in the background. This slide shows the proposed block plan. 2 semi-detached dwellings would be provided with amenity space to the rear and the side. The existing vehicular access would be widened, and a new additional access would also be proposed, allowing independent access for both properties to the front of the building. Parking would be provided in line with the Council's guidance to the front of each of the properties. The dashed line on this block plan indicates the outline of a previous permission which has been granted for 1 dwelling on the site. This slide shows the proposed street scene. As you can see, the building would feature a barn-hipped roof and small dormer windows, along with a front gable feature. It would be marginally higher than the adjoining property at number 2A Kiln Lane, but lower than that of number 4 and 6. Again, the dashed line on this drawing indicates the outline of the previous dwelling which has been approved on the site. On the rear, there would be a gable feature and a rear dormer, and these are the side elevations down here. 2 windows are proposed in the side at first floor level, both of which would be obscure glazed. Each property would have a living, dining, kitchen area, WC and study at ground floor, and 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms at first floor. Now this slide shows a comparison between the previously approved scheme and the proposal. As you can see, whilst the proposal would provide 2 dwellings, the footprint would be similar to that which has previously been approved and would not appear more cramped. This slide shows a comparison between the previously approved front elevations and the current proposal. As you can see, the building would have a marginally greater height, but the proposed barn hip ends reduce the appearance of the additional bulk. In conclusion, the proposal will provide an additional dwelling in a sustainable location in Farnham. The matters of principal and technical opinion are the impact on trees, noting that the Council's Tree and Landscape Officer has commented that the tree would not be significantly impacted upon, subject to conditions. Parking and highways, noting that the County Highway Authority have raised no objection to the proposal. The effect on the SPA, noting that a Section 106 agreement has already been signed to secure appropriate mitigation at Farnham Park. And then financial considerations and biodiversity. The matters for members' judgment are the design and impact on visual amenity, the impact on residential amenity, and the standard of accommodation and provision of amenity space. I would also like to provide a verbal update to Condition 5 in order to restrict all extensions and alterations that are permitted under permitted development, and not just windows, which in the agenda report, that's all it restricts at present. This should therefore be amended to read: Notwithstanding the provisions of the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Order, or any other order revoking or re-enacting that order with or without modification, no alteration or extension to the dwelling shall be carried out without the written permission of the local planning authority. The reason for the condition remains as set out on the agenda, and the recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. As I said earlier, this is subject to public speaking, so could I ask the supporter Jill Hanson to come forward? Thank you. I think you've had it explained. It's the long button, and the 4 minutes starts when you start speaking.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, councillors. My name's Jill Hanson from Planet Consulting. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. We are very pleased to have received an officer recommendation to approve our application for 2 dwellings at Kiln Lane, and I would like to use my time to provide comments in support of the scheme. The site, as you know, lies in the settlement area for Farnham, where development is considered acceptable, subject to its impact on visual and residential amenities. Planning permission already exists to demolish the existing bungalow and erect a larger dwelling in its place, which was approved in 2016. This application seeks to make a more efficient use of the site by erecting 2 dwellings in a sustainable location where local planning policy supports new housing development. This would optimise the potential of the site and, in so doing, boost the supply of housing as required by the NPPF. Concerns have been raised by third parties that the development would be out of character with Kiln Lane and that the site is unsuitable for 2 dwellings. The plot, however, is wider than neighbouring plots, including those to the immediate north and east, which also contain pairs of semi-detached dwellings. Being wider, it is capable of accommodating the 2 units without resulting in an overdevelopment of the site. In terms of scale, the new dwellings would occupy a similar position to the approved dwelling. The footprint would, however, be reduced by 8% compared to the approved scheme. This results in more space, in particular to the western boundary, and greater separation to the neighbour 4 Winston Walk to the west. It also allows for the provision of deeper gardens, which at 125 and 160 square metres each are considered ample by officers. In terms of design, the new units would take the appearance of a chalet bungalow with first floor accommodation provided in the roof. The building would be marginally taller than the approved dwelling, but this would be offset by the reduction in the size of the building and the change in roof design from gable ends to half hips, which reduces the bulk of the roof. In addition, the new dwellings would remain lower than the full 2-storey height dwellings to the north, as the street scene that you saw demonstrates. This, combined with the use of vernacular materials, ensures that the building would sit comfortably in the street scene. In addition, the siting and design have been carefully considered to ensure no harm to the amenities of adjoining occupiers. There is good space to the boundaries, obscure glazing is utilised where necessary, and most boundary vegetation would be retained. Car and cycle parking is also provided to standard, and the access arrangement considered acceptable to the County Highway Authority. So to conclude, the application site lies within the settlement area of Farnham, where there is no objection in principle to new residential development. The redevelopment of the site to provide 2 dwellings represents an efficient use of available land that would not have any adverse impact on the character or amenities of the area. As such, we find the proposal to be entirely consistent with the policies of the framework and the adopted development plan. Accordingly, we respectfully request that the application is approved in line with officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hanson. Members, over to you. I'd just like to point out that I was not the member that called this in, so I don't intend to speak first on it. So, members, over to you. Councillor Hodge.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have any issue with this at all, I have to say. It's a good-sized plot in an area of mixed housing, so there's been no conflict with it being semi-detached. It's a similar footprint to the earlier approved proposal. Room sizes fit the national guidelines. There's enough specified parking, so to me it's a no-brainer. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Well, I'm of the same mind as my colleague here, but I would like to hear from the member who called it in why they called it in, because that might give us an insight we're missing.
Councillor Frost, that member is not here this evening, so I'm afraid, short of phoning him, I'm afraid we can't do it. Councillor Hyman?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a little bit unhappy about the fact that it's been called and it's in front of us, but I do think we need to run through it anyway, despite the fact that the Office of Recommendation is to grant. There are some objections to this by residents, and if I could run through them with you quickly in case we've got any problems with them. If you turn to page 14 of the committee papers. In terms of out of character of Kiln Lane, I myself don't really have a problem with it because there are other properties around which I consider to be similar. I mean, obviously I don't know exactly how this is going to be built out, but from what I can see in the plans, it looks as though the previous or the existing consent that we've got for this property, apart from increasing 1 or 2 bedrooms within it, I don't think we can. Basically, if it went to appeal, then we'd probably lose on the basis that it's not that much different to what has already been agreed for the property. The same with the SBA issue. Unsuitable site for 2 separate dwellings. I don't know whether I would really like to ask the ward member who is here what she thinks on that, because I'm not particularly fussed about I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is suitable for Kiln Lane, but that's not my ward.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just say that presumably the ward member wanted this to be discussed in public. That's why they called it in, not necessarily to put their own point of view. So,
Okay.
you know, we just discuss what's there. We've all read the report and we just discuss what's in the report in public. That's the only difference.
Okay. As far as there's also there are reservations that residents have in terms of lack of parking. I don't see that there's a problem there for what we've got on the site, although I know it can be difficult up there, that we all have difficulty with parking. I don't see any reason why we can turn this one down, Madam Chairman, so I'm not entirely sure why it was called in, but maybe, as you say, it was just so that it is heard. Thank you.
Councillor Frost?
Chairman, thank you for allowing me to come back. I made my judgment based on the report that we have before us. I think it would be helpful, because I find it quite embarrassing that if a member calls something in for debate, it indicates that we've obviously missed something. And I think we should actually know where you say a member has called this in, why. Because if the member doesn't have the courtesy to turn up to tell us why, then at least we've got it on the agenda paper. But I've read this and reread this, and I can't see why there's a problem.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. I mean, I would imagine, and I have not spoken to anybody about this application, it would be perhaps the amenity space for 2 houses as opposed to 1. These issues should be aired perhaps in public. I don't think there's ever anything wrong with discussing something in public so that every side of the argument understands where we made our decisions. So, you know, I really don't think it's a big issue, and certainly other members have called items in and not turned up on the night, and we've still just carried on and discussed them. So I don't really see there's a problem here. We have the application, we have the officer's report, we've heard from Louise, we've heard from the public speaker, and it's up to us to make a decision on this application. Does anybody else wish to speak before we move to the recommendation? Councillor Hammond?
Can I just check then? Because often when members do call it in, they give the reasons for which they've called it in. Do we know that or do we not know that? Because if we do know what it is, if an officer present knows what that is, can we be told? And if not, obviously, if no reasons were given for calling it in.
I'm sorry, I really don't see why we're debating this issue quite so much. It was called in, we have an application, we've looked at it, we make a decision. That is what the committee does. I really don't think we need to go back over why the individual member called it in and then couldn't turn up on the night. Who knows? It happens to all of us at times. I really think we've got enough information in the report. Unless the officers have got something that will help us, I really think we just move to the recommendation.
So, Chairman, just a point. I pulled up the email from the council, and apologies, it wasn't to hand. But the reason for it is there was a request from a local resident to the ward member to call it in, and they considered it appropriate to call to the application to come before us. So that's the reason given. Thank you.
I mean, I never have a problem with discussing something in public. I'd much rather these things were done in open, and I really don't see that, we have been put at a disadvantage because somebody has called this particular application in. It's been looked at. We've all looked at it fairly. We've heard what everybody has to say. We're going to make a recommendation. It's as simple as that. So can we move now to that recommendation, which is quite simple, that permission be granted. It's on page 27 with the following conditions, but condition 5 with the removal of the words windows, so that we're taking away, have I got this right, Louise, all the permitted development rights? Yeah. So with that change to condition 5 and all the conditions as laid out in your report, the recommendation is that permission be granted. Can I see all those in favour, please?
That's unanimous.
Thank you, members. Moving on then to the second application, A2, WA 2017-0167, 73 Short Heath Road. Again, it's Louise who's going to present this one.
Thank you, Chairman. This application at 73 Short Heath Road is for the erection of a dwelling with new access, parking and amenity space. The site is located on the south-eastern side of Short Heath Road. This aerial photograph shows the site and the host property, 73 Short Heath Road, which is located here. 79 Short Heath Road is also adjacent to the site, set back from the other properties along 73 Short Heath Road, and there is also an access road in between the site and number 79, which serves these properties at the rear. These photographs are all taken from Short Heath Road. The top two are looking northeast towards the host property, which is this semi-detached property here, with the site of the new dwelling just located in front here. This bottom photograph is looking in the other direction towards number 79 Short Heath Road and beyond, and the new dwelling would be positioned in this location here. This first photograph on this slide is taken from within the site looking towards the host property. The second photograph is again taken from within the site in the rear garden area, looking towards the rear of the host property, which is here, and its attached neighbour, which is there. The third photograph is taken within the site. The new property would be positioned in this position here. And this final photograph is taken from within the site looking in the other direction towards the neighbour at number 79. There is one high-level window at first floor in the side elevation of this property. This is the proposed block plan. A new dwelling would be provided adjacent to the host property at number 73, and it would be positioned here. This property would be set back from the front building line of number 73. This is primarily to allow for parking spaces to be provided, 3 parking spaces, one there, and one there. But it also allows it to be stepped between number 73, the host property, and the number 79, which is set back. There is a new dropped curb proposed. This would serve both the proposed property and the existing property. The existing property doesn't have any off-street car parking at present, so there would be an improvement for this property over the existing situation. This slide shows the proposed street scene elevations. As you can see, the property would be well spaced between the host property and number 79 Short Heath Road. It would have a different style to the surrounding properties, but as you can see, the immediate street scene contains a variety of properties. The diamond pattern, which is depicted on the front, reflects the diamond pattern which exists on the host property. These show the other elevations. This top one is the rear elevation, which also shows it in the context of the existing property on the site. And these two show the side elevations here. The property would provide 3 bedrooms at first floor and a 4th bedroom at second floor level. There are windows serving the stairs in the side elevation, at first and second floor level. These would all be obscured, and in the other side elevation, southwest elevation, there are also windows proposed at first and second floor level, all of which would be obscured with the exception of this triangular shaped window on the side here. The one looking towards number 79, Short Heath Road, would be obscured, but this one looking towards the street scene would be a clear glazed window, and that would provide light and outlook to this middle bedroom. The proposal would provide an additional dwelling in a sustainable location in Farnham. The matters of principal and technical opinion are car parking and highways, noting that there would be an improvement to car parking provision for the host property, and that the proposal would meet the council's car parking requirement, and County Highways raises no objection. The impact on the SPA, noting that a legal agreement has been completed, and finally biodiversity and financial considerations. The matters for members' judgment are the impact on visual amenity and trees, the impact on residential amenity, and the quality of accommodation and amenity space. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. And this application, once again, is subject to public speaking. So could I ask the objectors who are sharing the time, Gary Perrin and Beverly Taylor, to come forward? The microphones are pretty flexible, so if you sort of cozy up and then flick the microphone over, and it's the long button and 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening, I'm Beverly Taylor. I live at 71 Short Heath Road, which adjoins the existing property at 73. The two together are known as Pond Cottages. Thank you for this opportunity. The point I'd like to highlight to the committee is the significance of this application in terms of precedent. Many of the plots on Short Heath Road are large enough to accommodate another property in their gardens. 73 is not exceptional in that respect. Short Heath Road is characterised by a spacious feel and a green backdrop. According to documents on the Waverley Planning website, protecting that character was the main issue cited in rejecting every previous application there has been to build a second property within the curtilage of an existing one on Short Heath Road. If this application is granted, it will be the first of its kind. We can be sure that other developers are watching the decision with interest. They will know that previous applications failed principally because of their impact on the character of the area. They will interpret approval of this application as a relaxing of the rigour with which that character is protected, and as a green light to submit similar proposals. Those proposals will be harder to reject once a new precedent has been set. Approval will also signal to them that there are no negative consequences from cutting down all the established trees on a plot before seeking planning permission. Indeed, it will reassure them that doing so is likely to succeed as a tactic. Other developers will be encouraged to cut down trees speculatively in anticipation of helping through their proposals. I ask the committee to consider how their decision will influence other developers. The risk that approval will increase the speculative destruction of trees on Short Heath Road, and the potential for it to erode the planning authority's power to reject similar proposals in future, and their power to continue to protect the character of the area, which they have protected so well for so long. Thank you very much.
I live at 81 Short Heath Road, which is next door but one to number 73. The existing house is relatively small, but when taken together with the proposed house, the site will be significantly overdeveloped, even without any extension to the existing house, which is inevitable. The council previously considered a broadly similar scheme at 31A Short Heath Road and rejected it. The new house is to be situated towards the front of the site, and this causes two significant problems for me and my neighbour at 79, as our properties are set back from the road. The first is that there are to be 11 windows in the side of the three-storey house that will be facing us, and 6 of these are at levels 2 and 3. They will not only look into our front gardens, but also directly into our front windows, denying us privacy. Secondly, the parking has to be considered seriously. For the needs of the existing and the new property, there must be adequate provision for the occupants and visitors. The parking that is planned is squashed up to the front and side and is awkward and not enough. Only 1 space is planned for the existing house, with 3 for the new, but in reality only 2 of those spaces are serviceable because 1 car has to park directly behind the other, blocking the first. As a consequence, extra cars from 73 are bound to park in the main road, They cannot park in the bus stop between 71 and 73, so will park outside my house and that of my neighbour with whom I share a drive. This will block Shortheath Road and make it extremely hazardous and dangerous for us to see oncoming traffic and move out onto the main road. If this proposal goes ahead, then the danger will become the unacceptable norm. You have to take into account that Shortheath Road is a main road, which apart from the volume of cars, takes many large lorries that cannot pass under the Wrecksham Bridge. So off-road parking is absolutely essential. I ask that the application be rejected, but at the very least that the house be set back into the site to allow privacy and proper parking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I ask you to press the button again? Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Perrin and Ms. Taylor. Now could I ask a supporter of the scheme, Mr. Andrew Tompkins, to come forward? And once again, large button and 4 minutes from whenever you start speaking, sir.
Good evening, councillors, officers and Lady Chairman. We are the architects for this modest house, which has been designed to enhance the site and respect to maintain the amenity of surrounding houses. The position on the site, as agreed with officers, is about as far forward as it can be, while accommodating Waverley Zone parking requirements for 3 cars, and so that it fronts up to and addresses the street nicely, like some of the older cottages in the area. Surrey Highways officers suggested and agreed the parking layout, turnaround and the street access with us on site, and they're pleased with the results. It was their good idea to include a parking space for 73, which has never had one, or a dropped curb, and in the proposal, 1 neat drop curb will cover both houses. There remains a good distance between buildings, which maintains the amenity and light of neighbours. This is due to the separation afforded by the lane on one side and by virtue of being 6.5 metres from the gable of the existing 73 house on the other side. Overall, the building is no higher than the chimney of the existing cottage next door, which itself is of a tiny scale and set over 1 metre down from pavement level. The proposal's street-facing gable helps to create a low profile. It has a modest overall scale for the size of the plot, giving a good-sized garden and usable bedrooms. The house uses high-quality materials and echoes the pretty diamond pattern and creasing tar band from the cottage at number 73. The house uses familiar local vernacular forms and materials, but in a contemporary way which establishes it as being of our time. As can be seen from the street scene elevation, the design helps to promote its own unique sense of place in Shortheath Road, where there are a wide range of dwelling types, sizes and scales, from large detached houses to semi-detached cottages and big apartment buildings. Through a series of pre-application inquiries and with the assistance of the planning officer, care has been taken to keep the scale low and create a well-resolved series of elevations, add richness of detail and create pleasing window arrangements so that when viewed from 3/4 angle from Shortheath Road, the results are attractive and enhance the street scene. To conclude, this is a one-off family home which has been designed specifically to respond to its site. The applicant has given us the time we needed to work with Waverley to create something we are proud of. By filling gaps in established residential areas, we can make use of the existing infrastructure and to respond to a need for housing in Farnham. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tompkins. Members, over to you. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I'm the ward member and I called it in. Before I actually start speaking, I have a query which I would be grateful if the officers could help me out with. On page 44, I'm a little confused by the plethora of terms such as development area, settlement area, and built-up area. Could the officers please confirm that this is within the built-up area within the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Because on page 44 you go on to say that For the purposes of the current application, it lies within the developed area, but having regard to the recent High Court judgment, the site falls within the definition of previously developed land. But that very judgment said that things within the built-up area were not previously developed land. Could you clarify that for me, please?
Yeah, apologies. That is an error in the report. It's outside the definition of previously developed land.
Thank you very much. Okay, that makes my case a little easier. So it is outside the brownfield site area, so it is not a priority for development under the plans. Many of you will have heard me say this forever, and I make no apologies for boring you to death with it again, but we are supposed to be a planning committee, not a permit issuing authority, and this strikes me as a perfect opportunity to do some planning. Could we possibly look at the aerial photo? No, sorry, not the aerial photograph. Yes, the aerial photograph on page 34. No, sorry, the aerial photograph, it's the location plan, which is just before it on page 34. The spokesman for the developer said they have moved this house as far forward as can be. We can see from the street scene to the right that there is a row of cottages quite close to the road, and we can then see the street scene to the left. The houses are well moved back. If I remember the Farnham design statement correctly, and I hope I do because I wrote some of it in this area, we talked about long grassed front gardens being retained and being what we wanted to see, and we did not want to see tarmac-addamed areas and parking in front of houses on the road. This house neatly puts in tarmac-addamed parking in front of the road. What? Yes, thank you. Could we go back to the aerial one again for a sec? Sorry, the one before. That's it. Right. Wouldn't it be nice to step this back slightly and have something rather nice that instead of being right forward again with tarmac in front, could step back so that it made a reasonable stepping stone, if you like, from the houses at the front to the houses further back? Moving on, I note that the Farnham Town Council Planning Committee objected to it. You can see it on page 40. I won't bother to read it to you, but it's design out of character and negative impact on the street scene. The street scene spacing, a comment was made that the spacing is really quite good. If one looks at page 36, the diagram that you put up a minute ago, I'm not sure that I totally agree that the spacing is that wonderful with the house next door. And I know it's not a planning term, but it does look rather chunky to me. There was also a reference to trees being chopped down at the southern end of the property, which is the top of this picture. And I know that some of the residents have fear that this is in preparation for a second house on the plot. And whilst that is not before us at the moment, it does make one wonder why it is so far forward when it could be rather nicer and further back. The objector picked up the overlooking quite well, with many, many windows looking towards his house, and I have much sympathy with him from that respect. And I also noticed that yet again, as in many applications that come for us, the room sizes do not quite conform with our standards. I was actually delighted to see that the previous one did. It's the first one I've seen that does for a long time. But I wonder, if we have these standards, should we not be a little more diligent in persuading people to adopt them, or should we just forget about them completely? I think that's probably enough for me. Yes, thank you very much. That's enough for me at the moment. If anything drastic occurs, I hope I could come back later. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm sure that would be possible, Councillor Ward. Would the officers like to comment on standards, or should we take more and then have one big sweep?
Thank you, Chairman. Just if it's helpful, just to confirm, then the space standards are not our adopted standards. They are national guidelines. They haven't been adopted by the Council. We've tried to rely on them before at appeal and have not been supported. So that position hasn't changed on that point, but it's a matter to take into account. So just a point of clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Anybody else wish to contribute on this one? Are we moving straight to the recommendation? Right, in that case, let's do that. Gosh. So the recommendation is that subject again to all the conditions and no. Do the officers want to come back with anything before we move? No, no change to the conditions or anything. So the recommendation is very simple: that subject to all the conditions that are in your report, permission be granted. Can I see all those in favour of granting permission, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And those against?
3.
And do we have any abstentions? In that case, permission is granted. Thank you very much. And that, as far as I can see, is the end of the meeting. Thank you very much, members. Thank you very much, members of the public. And safe journey home. Thank you.